Let's talk on dragons and dinosaurs. The Bible actually talks about a dragon. We're all familiar with this verse. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Who does what? Deceives. He's a trickster. All right. Now, first of all, when you see that word dragon, what's the image that pops up in your mind? Something red and pointy? Okay. Well, I'm going to possibly bother you a little bit with this because the word dragon simply means large reptile. The idea of it being red and pointy and like that is pretty medieval, pretty few hundred years ago, not necessarily all the way back to the Bible days. And when John the Revelator was writing the word dragon down, I'm thinking he was probably far closer to the idea of a large reptile. Now keep that in your brain for a bit because that'll be important as we move along. Now, right now I'm going to give you a modern history of dinosaurs. And I like that subtitle so much, I gave myself a little smiley face. You know, a modern history, that's pretty good. Anyway, so let's take a look. How did they find them and what did they think about them when they found them? Now, this is a dude. I tell the kids, don't you want to be a scientist? That's a dude. So anyway, look at the hair. Robert Plot, who's head of the chemistry department at Oxford University in 1676, found a bone in England, wrote a scientific paper, first one ever, as what eventually we understood to be a dinosaur bone, just very similar to this in size. And he interpreted it not as a dinosaur because they didn't know about dinosaurs yet. What do you think he guessed it was from? An elephant. Okay, from a Roman era elephant in England. That's not a bad guess, but believe it or not, scientists can sometimes guess wrong. But anyway, they just didn't know yet about dinosaurs. Let's keep going. Let's go to America. America would be a good place to find stuff on dinosaurs. In 1836, a pastor, Edward Hitchcock, pastoring in a little town in Connecticut, noticed stone footprints by the side of the road as you come into town there. He saw them, and they looked like this, and he imagined that they were originally from giant birds, big birds, ostrich kind of birds, walked around in Connecticut years ago. Well, frankly, he didn't know about dinosaurs either. And here is actually a footprint, very similar, from the same area, a Connecticut, Massachusetts area, probably about a 6-foot tall dinosaur. Again, did not know about them. Let's keep going. Over in England, they keep finding things over in England. Dr. Mantell and his wife found some bones and a tooth. Could not identify the tooth. Showed it to some of their science-oriented friends. Finally, somebody says, well, I'll tell you what it looks like, but it can't be that. Well, what does it look like? It looks like an iguana's tooth, a little lizard's iguana tooth, except 20 times too big. Well, that eventually, with the discovery of more bones, led to the discovery of the Iguanodon, which means iguana tooth dinosaur. That's the first rendering by an artist of what they imagined perhaps a dinosaur to look like, before they even knew about dinosaurs, really. And I don't know, I just think it's kind of cool and old looking. They eventually found more bones of an iguanodon and have it more like that today. But the person who coined the term was an anatomist, a British scientist named Richard Owen, and he was a Christian, incidentally. And he is the one who came up with two words, put them together, Dinosaurus, which means awesome lizard. So, if you ever look at the old 19th century description, they put terrible lizard back in those days. But that means awesome. So awesome lizard, Dinosauria, which is a suborder. Now, but of all the things that ended up getting dinosaurs on the map, in my opinion, this was the biggest, the most significant thing. Dr. Joseph Leidy was a scientist who had a museum in Philadelphia, a science institute downtown Philadelphia. Heard about a woman over in New Jersey who had big bones in her backyard. Asked permission to dig them up and assemble them in his museum. He did not have a skull, made one out of paper mache, put it on top, put it on display, and called it a hadrosaur. Now, 1858, folks, that is the world's first dinosaur on public display. First skeleton on display. And this was sensational. because up to this point, they had no concept of big, giant animals living in the past like this. Now they could see one, and it was amazing. Now, Philadelphia is in the United States. They found out they could sell tickets. So people down the line, around the corner, and other museums are in the United States. And they wanted to sell tickets too. So they wanted to have one of these big critters. So all of a sudden there was a rush to find dinosaur bones. And for the next few years, the dinosaur hunters were doing it. Finding out, in Colorado, in Montana, in Wyoming, in South Dakota, in Arizona, northern Arizona, eastern Utah, they were finding these big bones. And they were making news. In Europe, they started finding more bones. In Belgium, they started to find Iguanodon skeletons. American dinosaurs were on the tour, on the move. And this is a big Diplodocus dinosaur, American dinosaur, in the Louvre Museum in Paris. This is about turn of the century. Sensational stuff. For 50 years of dinosaur discoveries, they were just big guys and they made the news. Now, this is the one that made it to the Smithsonian. So the Brontosaurus was our first serious dinosaur on display in the National Museum. Well, big, beautiful thing like this, people came from all around the world and looked at this giant skeleton, and they commented on it. Wow, this is magnificent. What a beautiful specimen. Are you sure about the head? Turned out they had the wrong head on the dinosaur. So they had a head from a Camarasaurus, and it was on an Apatosaurus body, and they called the whole thing Brontosaurus. To this day, if you want to get into a lively discussion with a dinosaur nerd, and they are out there, ask them this: do you think there is such a thing as a Brontosaurus? He will have an opinion, or she will have an opinion, trust me. So, Brontosaurus is made up of two different dinosaurs. So, now this was the painting on display at the Smithsonian behind that skeleton. So this was the first large work where people could look at it and imagine what the world would be like with such giant creatures there. Now, creationists were approached by evolutionists as they were finding these bones, and they would say to the creationists, they would say, okay, you guys who believe the Bible, we're your dinosaurs in the Bible, huh? And we had a couple of answers, anywhere from, I don't know, to, I think the devil made those bones and put them in the ground to confuse us. Okay, stuff like that. So we didn't have really good answers at first. We got much better answers now, but we didn't have really good ones at first. So, and incidentally, there are the heads that were wrong. For years, I had in my own collection, the biggest bone I had was fibula from a teenager Camarasaurus. That is a subadult. There's a subadult right there. There's a subadult right there. Okay. Subadult. Incidentally, I'm a post-adult. Have you not bought tickets before where it say, youth, adult, and then the one after that? So we're post-adults. Okay, so I don't have to be an adult anymore. I've outgrown adulthood. Doesn't that make sense? That's logical. Anyway, so for years that was my biggest bone, but now in our museum we've got this guy. And this is an exact copy, a molded cast copy at 19 pounds of our 700-pound real bone, thigh bone of a Camarasaurus, a full-grown Camarasaurus. Again, that would be this one, but the full-size thigh bone right here. And if you imagine, you're looking at an animal that had double this for the lower leg bone, add on that, about this much for the foot, and that's only getting up to about there, okay? Add a little bit more to the top here, and then of course he stretches his head up. His head would easily touch the top of the roof here, ceiling. So we're talking about big animals, totally fun. In fact, that was the only image of dinosaurs for 50 years. When you looked at the teeth of dinosaurs, They were vegetarian. So the scariest thing was, don't get stepped on, right? It's a big elephant. Well, that was the image for 50 years. And then they found something. Then they found something with teeth. And this changed everything. I've been on the back road in northeastern Wyoming. A guy who was familiar with the area was driving us down this dirt road. And he said, Stan, you see that little hill up ahead? Yep. That's where Osborne found it. The first Tyrannosaurus rex. T-Rex. King tyrant lizard. And this is it on display. Now, most of these are copied bones, not real. But anyway, take a look at this guy right here. That changed the image of dinosaurs overnight, as you can imagine. And now it's not just don't get stepped on, don't get munched, right? And people were wondering what kind of world that was. Now, for a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit about T-Rex because everybody's curious about T-Rex. Dinosaur collectors always want something from a T-Rex, which makes anything from a T-Rex extremely expensive because of the demand. But we know that they ate Triceratops. Now, how would we know that? So this ate these. How do we know that? Not the poop. Good guess. Good guess. You're kind of in the general right area. Yeah, this guy heard my lecture. Yes. And that is they found a skeleton of a T-Rex with a lunch still in the stomach. And when they looked at the bits and pieces of that lunch, they saw bits and pieces of Triceratops, which does not answer one of the bigger questions on T-Rex, and that was this a predator or was this a scavenger? Could have been a dead T-Rex he was eating. So what is he? And what would make you hesitate to think he wasn't a predator? Those little front arms don't look like they'd be good at grabbing something. Although there are some who think they just landed with those big feet on something. Anyway, also he doesn't particularly look fast. He's got a lot of weight. He's not exactly built like a cheetah. So sometimes I like to point out that we know a hadrosaur, which lived in the same area as a T-Rex. A hadrosaur could run 25 miles an hour. Oh, how do we know that? T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. That was a joke. Okay, too good of a lunch, I know. That's a bit of a problem. Now, but take a look at this right here. This is the fossilized remains of both a T-Rex and a Triceratops. When they looked at the Triceratops, there was teeth marks on the bones. When they looked at the T-Rex, there were broken rib bones. And here they are, all fossilized, covered in a mudstone and fossilized right there. There's only one explanation for how they could be like this. And that is they must have been at the top of some little hill as the waters were rising. They were forced to be close to each other. As they were forced to be close to each other, they started grappling and fighting. And sure enough, before much longer, they were covered with mud and preserved on the spot. So anyway, these are frankly the last little bits of the last bit of drama before the flood got to them and preserved them. Now, T-Rex footprints, there is at least two that I've heard of. This is first one in New Mexico that's verified. They not always 100% sure. This is T-Rex footprint. This one's 33 inches long, 28 inches wide, and 9 inches deep. That was a heavy critter. Now, this T-Rex is on display in Hill City, South Dakota, and it's been affectionately named Stan. Now, Stan is named after the discoverer of these bones. Stan was the guy that found it. Incidentally, they do not know the gender of any dinosaurs. When you find names on them, it's because they're named after their discoverer. So Stan was the most complete T-Rex ever found up until one later discovery at 40% complete. Now you might say 40% was the most complete. Yeah, you never find a dinosaur skeleton complete, 100% complete. Always something's missing. Never maybe a slight exaggeration, but it's really, really rare, which tells you something about the method in which it was preserved. But anyway, and why is that also important? Because technically you only need 10% of an animal for it to qualify as a skeleton. 10%. Yep, 10% is a skeleton. Why is that important? Don't be surprised if you hear news accounts on a new discovery of a dinosaur skeleton. And they will say, boy, does this fill in all the gaps. Man, does this answer all our questions. Boy, this completes the links. There's no missing links now. Or something like that. And it can be just 4 or 5 serious bones or parts of the animal. It can be really very minimal. What you never hear is months later when that discovery that put that scientist on the map is looked at by other scientists, you never hear anything later about, it's really not everything that first person was saying it was because of this, this, and this. And you never hear about that. Anyway, so Stan was most complete until they found a dinosaur named Sue. Dinosaur Sue was discovered in 1990, actually by the same people that was involved with Stan. That is the Larson brothers in South Dakota. They found this on Native American land. They thought all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted, and it turned out once they discovered what they had, they went to court as to who owned it. And actually the Native Americans won. So anyway, Sue was 90% complete. So she was significant. I say she, Sue found her. So Sue was sold to the Field Museum in Chicago for a little bit more than $8 million. And guess what? That's in Chicago. They sell tickets. That's in America. So Sue is on display, and Sue is 90% complete. Now, I hate to burst your bubble here a little bit, but almost everything you see there is a copy. It's a replica, not the real original bones. For a couple of reasons. Number one, they're very valuable. The original ones, they're heavy, they're brittle. They fall, they could break. If they fall on somebody looking at it, they could break. So they tend to keep the real bones aside, either in the laboratory to study or in some cases in another case to look at. In the case of Sue, her real skull is in a case upstairs. And the skull is everything for Sue, because you almost never find a dinosaur skull. Because skulls are first things to break. Very thin bones, fragile, almost never found complete. Sue was very complete, and they just could not have been more excited. There's a whole bunch of videos on the discovery of Sue. It's quite interesting, and the fight over who owned it. Now, T-Rexes actually are very helpful for creationists, believe it or not. And the biggest question we still are faced with, and that is how old everything is. That is probably our weakest area in terms of being able to absolutely slam dunk prove our position. In 2005, some bones of a T-Rex were taken to a laboratory, and they put it in solution to dissolve it to get a little bit more into the inside. They left them too long in the solution, and they got to the absolute middle, which they didn't want to do. But when it was looked at, you could almost hear a voice cry out across the nation, "We have soft tissue here." What? Oh, we got soft tissue. We've got flexible vessels, and we've got what sure looks like red blood cell stains. This should not be here. And they should not be there if you accept the 65 million year old age. Now, this was sensational. The woman who was the head scientist of this group, named Mary Schweitzer, either in South Dakota or North Carolina, South Carolina or North Carolina, I'm not sure which, published this information and was attacked viciously by scientists around the world. You dare call yourself a scientist? The university that has hired you should fire you. You're an embarrassment to the whole world of paleontology to do such shoddy work like that and to publish it, and on and on and on. And I mean, where are women's rights people when she got attacked like this? She listened carefully to their criticism, and there was one or two things she thought had some merit. She went back and redid her work, came back with the same conclusions. Now her work is reluctantly accepted in many places in the world. She made this statement, which is a very good statement. Here's a good solid science. Incidentally, she's a Christian, but a theistic evolutionist. Anyway, she said this: either there are ways of preserving organic material in ways we have not a clue, or these bones are not as old as we thought. Now that's a good science statement. So, okay. Meanwhile, because of this, suddenly we are looking for organic material in fossils thought to be too old to even try to find something in it. We're finding proteins and other organic material that should not be present. I've got a list of about 30 places that they've actually found it, and they find a new one every couple of months. They, for instance, had a Triceratops. One of the Triceratops horns they found had soft material inside of it. The guy that talked about that publicly lost his job in Cal State Los Angeles. So you got to be careful what you do with information like this. I talked to that guy. He's actually moved up to the Northwest. But anyway, they are now looking where they'd never thought of looking before, and they got a growing list. What's interesting is science for years has wanted to know how long it took for organic material to break down in bones. So how long would it take before a fossil didn't have anything left of basically the original animal? And they look, and they thought their studies showed that thousands of years would do it. Thousands of years would remove everything. I think the longest they thought anything could last was 1 million years. Now, the dinosaur bones had to be at least 65 times that. Okay, 65 million years. It's the youngest a bone could be, they think. So, when we present to them their evidence from their studies, we're showing them that these are thousands of years old, not millions of years. Of course, they don't like that, and I understand that. We're using data that they've gotten in their own studies. So, any questions on that? Age of the Earth, yes. Carbon dated with, it's a good question. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody try that yet, but carbon dating can work on some organic material. Incidentally, carbon dated is for thousands of years. You know that, not millions of years. Did you know that carbon dating is used for organic materials, things that used to be alive? And not rocks, yes. Not a mummified ones, but some that have been pretty well preserved. You'll see that. I got a couple of pictures here coming up. Let me hit footprints real quick. Footprints of fossil evidence. There is a place in Texas, a state park, where kids can splash around in the water in the creek bed, and there are dinosaur footprints in the rocks. How cool is that? I don't know of any other place like that. But that is the place where some people have felt there is evidence of human footprints next to dinosaur footprints. Have you ever heard of that? So, and this has made the rounds in Adventist churches a lot, partly because the first person who promoted this was a Seventh-day Adventist named Burdick. Anyway, this is from a place called Glen Rose, Texas. And that state park I told you about. Now you can see the water's washed, this is cleaned off, and you can see this clearly dinosaur footprint set. Whereas this one looks a little bit more human. Although if it was human, it would be a 6-foot-tall human and not a bigger one. But some of these look more human than others. These have been looked at very carefully by Loma Linda Geoscience, and looked at by people who have no problem with the concept of humans and dinosaurs living on the Earth at the same time. All that I've looked at on this, including very conservative websites, is the general feeling is there are no clearly human footprints with dinosaur footprints. There are some that have clearly been manufactured to look like human footprints, and then there are others that are basically not particularly clear enough to substantially determine they are. One of the problems is the area that it's coming from. And Glen Rose, Texas has for years known about these footprints, sold them to tourists coming around, and then started, and they know about this, the locals know that there were some that were carved to be human footprints and sold to tourists. Sometimes they'd take a dinosaur footprint and carve it to look like a human footprint. That would be perplexing to a scientist looking at it, because it would show compression underneath the direct grains, like it was a genuine pressure on this rock, but in the shape of a human footprint. And so that would be a little bit unclear. So anyway, there are those. I'd be happy to talk with anybody who's sort of a fan of this. There's almost always somebody who believes that there is evidence that is undeniable. And do you remember my description of the flood, and that the waters came up slowly and that people and animals had time to react? By the time the dinosaurs had water in their footprints, I'm thinking humans were nowhere around, even if they lived in the same area. I think they were already out of the area. That's just my thinking. I don't think they're both traipsing around at the same time, trying to get away from the water. Anyway, but you can see water can deeply affect footprint shapes. That's in Utah, recently found. A couple of other things real quickly, and then I will get to a point where I can answer questions. Another reason that we know that dinosaurs were reptiles is when we actually see a cast of their skin. Now, I've got this piece up here that you can look at. When a dinosaur died, it usually got covered up in mud, and that mud became rock. The bodies deteriorated and left the bones inside. So we would dig up years later trying to get the bones out. So we were only interested in the bones. People would be digging up the bones. Now they're a little bit more careful, and they want to see sometimes that just might have the impression of the skin in there because it pressed down on it. And sure enough, when we look at those impressions, we see scales just like any other reptile, like a snake or a lizard. So sure enough, they were reptiles. Another thing that's interesting is eggs. What about eggs? When I was a kid, I imagined a dinosaur egg to be roughly that size. Surely. But actually, here's a dinosaur egg. And this is as big as they get. So all dinosaurs, including the biggest ones, started off pretty small, which is interesting for a lot of reasons. But anyway, and no, there's no bones in this. And I knew there wouldn't be because of the chances are like 1 out of 10,000. But I happen to know for sure because some inquiring eyes, about 3-4 weeks ago at another church, I turned and it was on the ground. And 3 or 4 kids were looking very nervous. And sure enough, it had broken. And the bottom had popped open. And that did give you a pretty good view as to what the interior might have been. Because this basically is a broken egg at about that point. And there was no bones inside. So, but anyway, a very embarrassed young man at the next to his dad who was coming to confess, and the poor little guy was just so broken up. Felt so sorry for the kid. Anyway, fine, it's all good. So very few of them have bones like that. There's one that actually did have bones, embryos. But that's as big as they got. And incidentally, why would a nest be a problem for a creationist? Why would a nest of dinosaur eggs be a problem for a creationist? See if you can think about this. The flood, because the flood would have been a problem. How did they lay an egg, a nest in the middle of, and wouldn't it have been on sedimentary rock that had been laid by the, and all this kind of thing. So it looks like it would have been there for a while, and that doesn't jive with the flood. As they've studied this, creationists have studied this, and even though there's something like 100 nests, purported nest sites, they've gotten it down to about 6 that actually do look like nests. The others are actually evidence that the water washed these bits and pieces of eggs into a little basin. And so actually weren't laid there so much as floated into there. But anyway, it's just kind of interesting. Now, here's what some of you should be doing in a month. You can write this down if you need to. Information on being a volunteer at a dinosaur dig. And who would not want to do that? Come on. You appear to be intelligent people. And some guys like this could be involved. You'll need to have somebody go with you. But anyway, This is the Southwestern Adventist University's Dino Dig in Wyoming, northeastern Wyoming, in the most forsaken part of Wyoming you've ever seen. But it's just out there in the sticks. This is on land that's owned by a Christian family, a ranch that they've had for like 100 years in the family. It's a world-class dinosaur bone deposit, and they did not want the bones to be studied by evolutionists. So God providentially connected Southwestern with them, and for the last, 20, 30 years or so, every June they would organize, send a group of anywhere from graduate students with anybody else who wants to come, frankly, and sign up and volunteer, come to this place and help dig up dinosaurs for the month of June. They find enough in 1 month to study for a year and come back and get another batch. So this is Dr. Art Chadwick here, the head of the science department. He's handing it off a bit now to Jared Wood, but anyway, here's a worship he'd have after breakfast and talk about where people are going to go and what they're all going to do. And sure enough, off we'd go and we'd dig up dinosaur bones. Now, this is I'm digging up a rib bone of a hadrosaur, which is a giraffe-sized, two-legged dinosaur. And the rib bone is probably about 3 feet long. You see that little squeegee bottle right there? Which squeezes, kind of like a super glue. You squeeze it onto the bone and just go right into the bone and make the bone very hard and easy to transport in one piece. Before we wrap it up and take it away, somebody like Dr. Chadwick, one of his associates now, would bring a GPS ground position locating sensor, and bring it right there and put it on the corner of the bone and register its location down to a fraction of an inch. Okay? And then eventually take a picture and drop that picture of the bone to scale into this software package. Look at that. Now that is as though all the bones are in place as though you remove the dirt. And you're looking right down on top of it, just where they were found, to scale. In fact, this is cutting edge stuff. You can actually take this program and turn it sideways and see it 3D. You can see how they're layered. The bigger bones are deeper than it's amazing. It's pretty cool. So this is cutting edge, and this is being done in archaeology now, thanks to this paleontology work. But take a look at these bones. Most of these, not all, but most, come from a Camarasaurus. Not Camarasaurus, hadrosaur. A kind of hadrosaur called Edmontosaurus. Now, that means this kind of guy, all right? Now, this area, if I go back to where the bone was being dug, there's about a 24-inch layer right here that the bones are found in. Nothing above, nothing below, but you can see by the color and the texture, you can see that layer. Now, I asked Dr. Chadwick, because there's other places around there with that layer. I said, have you done a survey of the area? Yes, we have. Is the bone field consistent everywhere? It is. I said, wow, have you done any number crunching? Says, we think we're looking at the remains of between 5,000 and 10,000 hadrosaurs. Okay, so now let's take a look at this a little bit. What happened to these critters? First of all, what do you not see in that bone field? Okay, you don't see skulls and you don't see skeletons, right? So that already gives you a hint a little bit about what's happened here. Whatever got these here were not nice to thin bones or even connections. Let me tell you what must have happened here, and I don't mean to get a little gross, but this is the way it's got to be. Whatever killed these bones, and you can tell from the surface of a bone if a bone has been in the air for very long. It does something to the outside of it, dries it a little bit. That will always be recognizable. Well, anyway, these bones do not have that surface evidence. Also, the corners of the bones show rubbing, so like they've been rolled. Now, this is what must have happened to 5,000 to 10,000 hadrosaurs. Whatever killed them did not leave their bones in the sun, in the air, but instead rolled the bones, rolled the bodies, probably miles. So much so that the bodies started to come apart, the skulls broke, and these bits and pieces eventually got washed into a lower area, some kind of a basin, got mud on top of them, covered them up, and preserved. What does that sound like to you? Sounds like part of the flood, doesn't it? And there's no other explanation for this. And so this is a world-class bone field, yes, in terms of numbers of bone. In some places you can't put your shovel in the ground without hitting something. But it's also quite clearly an evidence of a mass killing of dinosaurs consistent with the flood, the Bible flood. So, interesting. So you could do that this June. Just think of it. Sign up with Southwestern Adventist University. Go to their website, check out Dino Dig, and you can sign up. Now, you've got to pay a daily fee that covers 3 meals. And you got to bring your own camping gear. But anyway, they got showers. Okay. All right. So does the Bible tell us anything about dinosaurs? Well, first of all, it's interesting. On day 5, when God made great sea creatures, the word for creature in Hebrew is tananim. And for the rest of the Old Testament, tananim usually means a reptile. So did God create great sea reptiles? I'll leave that to you to decide. But there's 2 animals in Job that God is bragging about. One is Leviathan. Remember Leviathan? In fact, there's more than a chapter on Leviathan. It's really something. Whatever it is, God was really... Yes. You remember it. Good. Attaboy. So Leviathan appears to be a water dweller. If you have the kind of Bible that has in tiny print at the bottom of the page, scholars think a Leviathan was what do they say? Like a Nile crocodile. And I think some of that's not terrible, because it says it has skin that's very hard to penetrate, bows and arrows, spears, that kind of thing. But it makes the water boil. And if a crocodile has something in its mouth, its prey in its mouth, it will roll with it. And when it rolls with it, it kind of makes the water look like it's boiling. So I don't know. And it does say it's got, fire breathing, or hot breath or something. Not sure about Leviathan. But for now, I'll accept the scholar's view of it. But this one's different when we're looking at behemoth. Behemoth, first of all, in Hebrew, the word behemoth simply means beast. No help there. So what kind of animal is God, shall we say, bragging about to Job? Which I made along with you. I mean, 6th day of creation. He eats grass like an ox. Good. Vegetarian. Okay. See now, his strength is in his hips. His power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs like bars of iron. Tremendously powerful middle, right? He is the first of the ways of God. Now, that phrase really got me. What does it mean that he is the first of the ways of God? Now, when I've looked at the scholars thinking about this, they generally agree it's not talking about chronology, first thing God made. Rather, it stands in first place. Or that is kind of at the top of the heap, the king of all animals or something like that, the alpha, the most amazing ever. So I'm beginning to think, okay, scholars, let me see what you say about behemoth and those tiny little prints at the bottom of the page. What do they say about behemoth? The ones that say the other is a crocodile. Hippopotamus. Okay. Does a hippopotamus strike you as the most amazing animal ever? Okay, take a look at this phrase right here. He moves his tail like a cedar. And that literally, he sways his tail like a cedar. And a cedar tree is the largest tree in the Middle East. Okay, have you ever seen the tail of a hippopotamus? And frankly, second choice, elephant. All right? So, moves his tail or sways his tail like a cedar tree. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now, that's the south end of a hippopotamus for scale. And there is Job. Might he be talking about something like this? That would make you think of a tail like a giant tree. Now, I'll let you think about this. This would be a legendary animal to Job, but still, if this were indeed an animal that God had originally created, it would certainly remain in the memories of some. So, take a look. I'll leave that to you, but I think that's closer than a hippopotamus. I'll just leave that there. And certainly the alpha of all animals. Now, here's an important question to ask for Bible scholars like yourselves. What does the word evolution mean again? What's it mean, evolution? Change. It means change. Now, as creationists, do we believe any animals changed? Oh, we think some of them evolved? Well, maybe not according to the popular theory, but some animals change because we do not think that the animal that tricked Eve looked like that. Correct? Now, if you believe Desire of Ages, Patriarchs and Prophets, and other quotes of Ellen White, as well as it's very strong Jewish tradition, the animal that was in the tree could fly. And so, whatever it was attractive. Eve did not see a snake and say, boy, let me go look at the snake. Now, whatever it was, it became something different. Now take a look, and for you to understand this a little bit better, and you remember my illustration on this probably, Pastor, you almost need to unscrew your heads and put on other heads, because you are Greeks. You can't help it. You're Westerners. You think like Greeks because you were born Greeks. Now, if you could understand this following topic as a Hebrew, you would do better. So if you could possibly screw on your Hebrew head for a minute, that would be very helpful. I'll wait while you do that. And think about this. The subject is blessings and cursings. Because to a Greek, if you bless somebody, you basically say, have a nice day. If you curse somebody, they just cut you off in traffic. Okay? But to a Hebrew, it was much, much more than that. Something that was blessed was substantially, tangibly better than what it had been before. Something that was cursed was now a couple of steps down below what it used to be. Are you with me on this? When Jesus said to his disciples, when you go to a town, you find somebody worthy and you stay in their house. Now, if it works out good, let your peace be on that house. But if they prove to be not worthy, then you leave and you take your peace back. That's a Hebrew concept of blessing. That house will forfeit the blessing it was going to get by your presence. Are you with me on this? So this is a concept very clear in Hebrew thinking. Now, when God said, you are cursed now, you will now become a lesser animal than what you were. You are now going to lose the beauty and the interesting look and the attractiveness that caused Eve to come over and listen to you. You are now going to be something that you have a tendency to run from, frankly, instead of run toward. Now, more importantly, it says you are cursed more than all cattle, and all animals are now going to see the effects of sin, and all will become less than what they were at creation. Are you with me? That's what that says. You are cursed more than all cattle. How is it going to look for you? Well, snake, you are now going to be on your belly and you shall eat dust. In other words, you'll crawl around and you become much less. Take a look. So remember, this is what triggered the flood, and that is the decay of animals as well as people in becoming corrupted and violent. So animals started to become more and more violent towards each other. Take a look at this critter right here. This is an ankylosaur, and an ankylosaur looks like, to me, it looks like a tank on 4 legs. Doesn't he? Look at these. He's got these protrusions, these spikes coming out of his back. He's got a club for a tail. He's got an armor-plated head. This animal does not look, to me, like he waddled out of the Garden of Eden. This thing looks to me like he's ready to fight something, or somebody's going to be after him soon enough. Are you with me on this? So this looks like an animal from a violent world. The Stegosaurus has got armor plating on his back. He's got spikes in his tail that can whip around as a weapon. This is Pachycephalosaurus, which basically means bonehead. A very thick skull. Could apparently run into things with its skull. Now, and look at this guy. This looks like something you'd want to pet in the Garden of Eden. So the point is, it looks like some animals became violent. Now, I asked the pastor, are we still in your understanding of who's here? Pretty much? Okay. I'm going to share with you a couple of Ellen White quotes at the end of our talk that talks about amalgamation. And I'm going to insert that into my understanding of dinosaurs, okay? But anyway, remember what I just showed you about combat-oriented dinosaurs. Real quickly here, could God have made an animal with sharp teeth and it never was meant to be a meat eater? Is that possible? Now look at this guy. Okay, how about these? These are serious canine teeth on bear skulls. This is a panda bear. What does a panda bear eat? Bamboo. Anything else? Nothing else, just bamboo. And it's got serious canine teeth that to an evolutionist always means meat eater. So you show this to an evolutionist, the answer will be, when you ask them, what do you make of this? They'll say, okay, this used to be a predator. So can you see a panda bear trying to chase something down? Anyway, because they're locked into that model, sharp canines means meat. Now this is a grizzly bear. You'll never find more serious canines than on a grizzly bear. And a grizzly bear is an omnivore. It eats anything. So if it's in a place where there is fish available, it will eat fish. If it's in a place where there are no fish, it will not eat fish and do fine. So the point is, you can survive by not necessarily eating meat, even if you have sharp teeth. Incidentally, speaking of sharp teeth, this is a tooth I have from a Spinosaurus. It's right up here. You can take a look. Spinosaurus is a crocodile on steroids. But anyway, look at this guy. This is actually bigger than a T-Rex. A lot of sharp teeth. But look at this trough right here. See that trough? That's from the other tooth on the other side of the mouth. Whenever it closed, it rubbed along there. So I talk to young people in ways they understand. This dinosaur needed braces. Anyway, and this is a wolf fang to give you an idea by size. That's a Camarasaurus tooth. It's spoon-shaped. There is a Triceratops tooth, and it's very much a vegetarian tooth. Now, quickly, dinosaurs to birds. I just heard the other day at a scientist being interviewed, just meant to be a public educator kind of guy. He says, Professor, are there any dinosaurs today? Well, yes, we call them birds. Birds are our descendants of dinosaurs. So yes, birds are the dinosaurs that are around today. Oh, brother. Okay, so, and incidentally, they really do feel like, oh, please, come on, you have to believe that. This is so established. All right, well, let's see how established it is. So 2 theories about dinosaurs to birds. Number 1, large ground bipeds. So the idea would be this somehow became a bird. Now, what's the problem with that? I'm waiting for somebody to say what's not the problem. But okay, these little arms here have got to be far and away the longest limbs. These little big heavy legs have got to go. This big heavy tail has got to go. Be nice if it could develop hollow bones and feathers. So all those things are a little bit down the line, but of course, it had to have happened. Okay, but the other theory is small crocodiles from the trees. And the crocodile supposedly climbed up a tree, something like a crocodile, saw food, jumped out, got it, was successful, made babies. Okay, next. Somehow or other, one got lucky enough to get a little bit of a skin fold in between these 2 legs and could sail out a little further and get more food. More successful, more babies. Somehow or other down the line, that skin fold became a wing. And somewhere down the line, those bumps on the skin these bumps on the outside of the skin became follicles that grew up and became feathers. This is why they think that there's a war against science. No, there's a war on behalf of good science. But anyway. Okay, so whenever you go to KFC, you're going to KFD, Kentucky Fried Dinosaurs. Oh, please give me a bucket of crispy T-Rexes. That would be fine. Incidentally, they are really promoting it. You know who's at the head of the promotion of that evolution, dinosaurs to birds? National Geographic. Nobody promotes it more than them. And they've had a lot of interesting covers and mistakes that they've made in promoting it that they admit to. But one time I read an article on T-Rexes, in there. Of course, they have fabulous illustrations. And they're reading this article about this mother T-Rex and her chicks. Okay, now is there a little bit of a promotional thing going on there? T-Rexes didn't have baby lizards, they had chicks. Okay, we know where you're going with that. Anyway, so let's take a look at the fossil layers to see if this makes sense, because feathered birds go as far as Archaeopteryx down here in the Jurassic. Remember I told you about Solnhofen where this shrimp was found? They found the Archaeopteryx, and that's Jurassic layer, middle Jurassic layer, supposedly 150 million years, and that's where they found what they consider to be the oldest or deepest bird fossil. Okay, dinosaurs, they've got two kinds that are interesting. One is flying dinosaurs. Did flying dinosaurs become birds? No, everybody agrees. No, not flying birds. Land dinosaurs became birds, which makes it two lines of animals that had to develop flight instead of one, which is always interesting. Anyway, so land dinosaurs, okay, now these are deeper, up in the upper Triassic, so maybe some breakaway of this animal came and became a bird, okay? Maybe that happened. All right, oh, here's a problem. They got birds down now to the same level as the beginning of dinosaurs. Check this out. This is so funny. This is bird footprints found in a rock in Argentina. And here's the problem, gang. Triassic layer rock. They have tried really hard to not make it Triassic layer rock, but it is Triassic layer rock, and it's bird footprints. And check this out, it's got the backward toe, a little helix there, and so it is a bird. It's not a lizard, and it's hopping around on this mud. And what do they have to say about this? It's too deep, right? It's significant because we find footprints, this is a scientist who works on this, find footprints with morphology, that shape, identical to modern birds and rocks that predate by 55 million years the first record of true aves, that's birds. So these footprints are 55 million years out of place, too old, not helpful. So incidentally, whenever you see it's significant, that's science talk for I don't have a clue about this. I cannot explain it. So, so they'll just kind of put it out there. Yep, that's what we got here. So anyway, now can I explain this to you in a flood model that makes total sense? When in Argentina and this rock, this is being formed, this was mud. And you had a seagull-sized bird land, looks, oh, there's a place to land, it's caught in the air, looks at it, okay, let's land here. Hop, 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 oh, here comes the water. Hop, hop, let's get out of here. Choom, off it goes. And got caught layer with other birds and much higher levels up. Doesn't that make sense? Okay, do this if you follow. Okay, thank you, good. This guy, yeah, he pulls his mouth, that's good, that's good. He's overacting, not that every young person does it, but yeah, okay. So you get this. This is funny to me. So this is the best way to describe that. And incidentally, footprints step back our origins? No. So dinosaur evolution. When you think about dinosaurs, surely there's evidence of dinosaur evolution. And there are 10 kinds of dinosaurs. We'll put birds in there just to show you how open-minded we are. Let's call it a dinosaur. We're all here. These are how they connect. And this is going deeper in the rock this way. This is higher in the rock. This is lower in the rock. This is further back in time. This is more toward us. Okay, so when we dig down here, are there fossils here? We're trying to get back to an imaginary ancestor of all dinosaurs, probably Triassic. So let's take a look. Let's dig down below here, and we didn't find any there, or, boy, George, we didn't find any ancestors to any dinosaurs. And if you think I'm kidding, here's a dinosaur evolutionist who says, from my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So when you think about dinosaurs, surely there's evidence of evolution there. No, they just show up just like everything else in the fossil record and buried, and that's it. So no changes. All right. Candidates for largest dinosaur. How big did they get? They got maybe 130 feet long. How long is this building? Anyway, probably as long as this building. maybe longer. 70, 80 tons. But the average size of a dinosaur was the size of a large dog. And they got as small as chickens. Now, what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur? In other words, not just a lizard. What's the difference between a dinosaur and just a regular lizard? And I just gave you the hint that it's not size. It has to do with their structure. One is awesome. You don't think lizards are awesome? Awesome dinosaur, yes, awesome lizard. Actually, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'll give you points on that. Yeah. But what's the structural difference in the body? What's the difference between a lizard and a dinosaur? And did you hear me talk about it before? You're actually on the right track, but not sizes of legs. Hips. Who said hips? It's in the hips, brother. It's all in the hips. Lizard hips. Okay, quite literally. Lizard hips have the legs going straight out. So a lizard basically goes like this to get around. And incidentally, that's Komodo dragon, that's alligators, that's everything. We don't have dinosaurs today, even though big lizards, but not dinosaurs. Whereas dinosaurs have hips that put the legs straight down, whether it's 4 or 2, gets the body off the ground. And that, folks, to a scientist, is the difference between a lizard and a dinosaur. So, now why is that important about size? That's important because we have some questions about the following issue. And that is, did any dinosaurs sneak onto the ark? Okay? Did they try to cut line? Okay? Now, in the Adventist church, we've had a problem with this subject for years. I have at least 2 people approach me at the Union Conference office saying, Stan, when I was in school, we could not talk about dinosaurs. So we've had a problem with this, and I'll show you why we've had some questions about the subjects of dinosaurs. But let's assume for a minute that some might have gotten on the ark, maybe not the biggest ones, and you'll see why I said not the big ones. And did these possibly become the source of dragon stories from all around the world? Whether it's China, whether it's England and St. George slaying one, these are not necessarily house size. They could have been horse size. But in ancient days, Alexander the Great, Marco Polo, these people casually mention on their trips that they saw a dragon. It was no big deal. It was in a cave or something. Typically, these dragon stories deal with an human encounter with one. It's always like the last one of something. It's not a herd or flock or a family. It's like one. It's almost like the very last tail endings of the existence of this species or this animal. And they treat it that way. Now, when you ask an evolutionist, why are all these dragon stories, giant dragon stories from around the world, these giant reptiles, lizards? Why is that? Why in so many cultures? And they might say something like, well, I think they probably just came across some big remains and imagined them to be, dinosaur, lizards. I say, well, where would you get a lizard from that? And what's a lizard anyway? To most people living in the old days, a lizard was an annoying little animal. Honey, there's a lizard in the kitchen. Will you please come get it? Right? I mean, nothing scary. So if I saw a giant bone and I lived in an area where there were wolves, why not imagine giant wolves having lived here? Something scary, something scary. But instead, everybody keeps coming up with giant, annoying lizards. And I would suggest to you that that's because those are memories that have been embellished over time of genuine encounters of the last living examples of, frankly, dinosaurs, what we would call dinosaurs, i.e. dragons, i.e. large lizards. Now, let's take a look at this subject. I'm going to end up with this picture. I'm going to show you a few quotes. I'm going to make this T-Rex really scary looking for a minute. Put a nice, scary head on him. Remind you of this quote. And the dragon who does what to the whole world? Deceives the whole world. Now, Revelation 12 is just in front of Revelation 13, which is just in front of Revelation 14. Good. Okay. 12, 13, and 14 move into the last days. And here we have a very active deceiver trying to trick the world. And what was the message of the first angels? Worship God as creator. What would the devil like to trick us into thinking? That we weren't created. That we weren't made by the hands of a loving creator with a future and a hope. Instead, something else, some other story. And oh, what kind of image would help promote that? I'm going to change that word dragon for a very similar word. It's not out of line in terms of translating. I'm going to put a more modern word in there. So that great dinosaur, that big awesome lizard, who deceives the whole world. Now you tell me if the devil hasn't successfully used the dinosaur as an image to question the biblical view of where we came from. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, how about somebody seeing a picture of a dinosaur and saying, oh yeah, dinosaurs, millions of years, not Genesis. Am I right? I think he uses successfully that image. So interesting to me that he uses that. Still using a serpent to trick. Okay, now, having said that, I'm going to go to famous quotes in Adventist thinking that have challenged some people to try to understand what was being said. Now, you've heard this one, and this is from Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3. Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3 becomes part of Patriarchs and Prophets later, but not everything. Some was left out, including this, and for reasons you'll probably see why. But if there was one sin above another which called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast, which defaced the image of God and caused confusion everywhere. Now, take a look at that. Some people have thought what she was saying, and amalgamation means mixing, okay? Mixing. So, was this a crime of mixing man with beast? Some people have thought that, and that has been strongly denied by Ellen White estate people. And I thought there was a quote from Willie White. I can't find it, but I thought he said the same thing. She was not saying with this, man with beast, but rather man with man and beast with beast. And the amalgamation of man caused the defacing of the image of God, and the amalgamation of beast caused confusion everywhere. You'll see what we mean in just a minute. But first of all, if there's one sin above another which called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was this. And I'm thinking, if that was the most serious thing that caused the flood, that's going to be in the Bible. So I go to Genesis 6 and I read these words. The sons of God looked upon the daughters of men, saw that they were beautiful, and married whomever they would. And right after that, God says, I'm done. 120 years for man. That's it. So it looks like it was a triggering event for God. The mixing of who's sons of God and who's daughters of men. Hello. Seth's family, the godly line, those who worship the God, the ones who called, in those days, men called on the name of, this is when they started calling on the name of the Lord. Those would have been the ones that were godly and following God, whereas the daughters of men would be Cain's line. And these were idolaters, according to Ellen White. So these men married out of the church, following pretty faces, and married out of the church. And because of that, God lost the last ones he could contact, the last ones that he would reach out to. There was nobody there. And the thoughts of men were only evil continually, remember? So the last line of people that he could depend on and connect with, and that would make sense if that was the thing that caused the flood. The last ones that God could connect with were gone. Now, so that defaced the image of God. How did it deface the image of God? Man was only evil continually, and he was violent. Did that deface the image of God? It's nothing like God intended for man to be. And he was sorry he made man. It would take a lot for God. Yeah, anyway, it gets to me. Now, check this out. So beast, there's amalgamation of beast, and that caused confusion everywhere. Take a look. Every species of animal which God had created were preserved in the ark. How many? Every. The confused species which God did not create, which were the result of amalgamation, were destroyed by the flood. Oh, there's confused. So this caused confusion everywhere. What? The mixing of animals. And what would a violent, superior knowledged race want to make animals into? If they're into violence and they see the most amazing line of animals that God had created, wouldn't they look at them and say, what kind of pit bull can I make these into? What kind of warrior animal? What kind of hunter? What kind of sport animal for the arena can I make these animals into? And I think that's what some of these combat-oriented animals came from. Does that make sense? Those were the confused species, the amalgamated ones that a violent race would like to see created. Does that make sense? So again, and this is consistent with the way the devil works. The devil takes the very best things God makes and messes with them. Marriage, Sabbath, the most amazing line of animals. Why not? So to me, this makes sense. This is the way the devil works. So now, there were a class of what? Very large animals which perished at the flood. God knew that the strength of man would decrease. And these mammoth, that means giant, animals could not be controlled by feeble man. So there was a class of animals that were huge that God decided to also let perish in the flood, because people were going to get, frankly, weaker and smaller and die sooner and all that stuff. We were going downhill. And big giant animals would not be easy to deal with. Now, that's talking about these guys. It's got to be animals larger than elephants. Why? We got elephants. So it's got to be a class of animals above elephants. And they are not destroyed because they were confused or amalgamated, but because they were too big. Does that make sense? So why would God create animals like this? The answer is pretty simple, really, if you think about it. Prior to the flood, the atmosphere of the earth was very pro-plant. You could probably practically watch plants grow. God needed giant hedge trimmers. And incidentally, after the flood, the atmosphere would be different and plants could not grow. And of course, they were wiped out for a period. And there might be a real shortage of food, so that would be another thing. Yes? They used to imagine giant creatures in their instant past, their distant past. Yeah. So it makes you think that they had slight memories of these giants. They also used to, the idea of titans. They used to think that people were bigger and lived longer. That's also based on biblical truth as well. So, and kind of made bigger than it really was. You can imagine it bigger, but so you see these things. Very good. Very good. Okay, so mammoth animals died because they could not be controlled by feeble man. Now, I've been warned that henceforth we shall have a constant contest. How often? Constant. Science, so-called, and religion will be placed in opposition to each other. Why? Because finite man could not comprehend the power and greatness of God. We can't explain everything God does, so we try to make it explainable, and we come up with fables and fairy tales and don't accept God's explanation at face value. Yeah, we can't, heaven forbid we should ever say, I can't figure this out. I guess I'm not smart enough. That's a hard thing for us to say. Especially scientists who believe that everything, frankly, can be understood and discovered and explained. Everything can be explained if we just know. There's a few things you can't explain. Anyway, that's it. Do you have questions? Because they're based on the shape of their bodies. And the imagination is that if they're similar shape, they were related to each other. So they kind of had it like family groups, like cousins. And then there would be further out, and that's kind of just the way you do family groups. So they look at them like family. They did not connect, and that's what I was showing you. The fossils didn't show any connections. And they thought there would be connections, but they haven't found it. Yes? Yeah.
My question was, are you saying that God created the dinosaurs before the flood?
Yes, and I think so. Yes, and not necessarily. I'm not sure what to do with T-Rex. T-Rex to me looks like a kind of a pasted up group of different dinosaurs, frankly.
So then what would be the amalgamations that he was talking
Yes, the amalgamations. I'm sorry, maybe I didn't make that clear. So what I was talking about, remember those combat-oriented dinosaurs, the ones that looked like they were living in a combat-oriented world? These would be the ones that were manufactured by man.
Yeah, so you were in a way saying there are three classes of dinosaurs. The ones that were manufactured,
Yeah, or whatever.
the ones
yes.
that were, and then there are two classes of created dinosaurs. One class that was destroyed at the flood because they were too big,
Too
and one
big.
class that maybe
Yes.
survived.
Yes, they would be
But they were
elephant
smaller.
size on down, basically.
But
If you think
somehow
of-
those died off.
No, those may have lingered for a while in the
then
dragon
died off
stories,
later
the
on.
dragon stories. In other words, they were always the last little remnant of that kind of animal, whatever it was. They called them dragons, which meant big lizards. And yeah, and they just seem to disappear around the world. We're losing species all the time. You know, there's some evidence that mammoths were driven to extinction by hunting. So it could be that we just wiped out some of these animals. Yeah, could be. Yes.
So you know, like how you're talking about the whole flying thing with dinosaurs.
Hmm.
How would that, like, they said like pterodactyls and they had like hollow bones. How would the bones like preserve if they are hollow? If they'd be really brittle?
Okay. The bones of birds, ancient birds, are not very well preserved. You just see basically the lines of them. You don't really see the bones too much of fossilized birds. But dinosaur bones are very fossilized. Yeah, you can see them. So yeah, I think they're distinct. I don't see dinosaurs and birds having the same kind of bone.
So how do you account for the polar caps and the ice age?
Yeah, sure. Okay. And I've recently working through a meteorologist, a creationist meteorologist, an expert, and probably the world expert on Ice Age, at least from a creationist viewpoint. And he had quote after quote after quote of top class, world class scientists who very frankly say we have no clue what caused the Ice Age. Because for Ice Age to happen, you have to have cool summers. Cool summers are death. I mean, you can't have a cool summer with anything remotely like our patterns now. So something happened to make things colder. Now, if it happened the way we think, we've got an explanation, and this would be basically two or three things. Number one, volcanic action in the oceans, lingering results of the flood. Volcanic action warmed the water significantly in the ocean, put a lot of it in the air, evaporation, and much of it traveled over the earth. What also is part of volcanic action is dust in the air, ash. Once you get up into the sky, you cool down, you reflect off the sun's rays. So basically, we think that volcanoes from the flood are what caused it. And basically kept the air cool, but lots of water, warm water, caused moisture to travel over the cool land masses that never got above freezing for a while in the north and caused these layers to build up and become the Ice Age. After a while, the volcanic action died back and got us out of the Ice Age. You've got to have something significant in terms of a catastrophe to trigger something like this. And in the case of the Ice Age, you even have some mammoths and things that were frozen virtually mid-chew, you know, with food still in the mouth and everything. So some of it was pretty rapid, caught animals off guard and so forth. Yeah, but it had to have cool summers, and that, cool summers, impossible for science to explain. Yes?
So if pterodactyls, pterodactyls could have like flown and dodged the flood, which I'm thinking, but wouldn't the Ice Age have killed them after the flood if they escaped the flood?
Yeah, we don't know if pterodactyls survived the flood or not, but they were flying animals, and if God created them. Incidentally, I saw the skeleton of I forget how to pronounce it, Quetzalcoatl. It's a Mexican word, ancient Aztec kind of word, but it was the size of a small airplane, 30 feet wingspan of one of these ancient birds. Imagine the size of that. And yeah, there's a big question if it could even get off the ground. But anyway, so yeah, yes.
Two things. One, there's some Southwest Indian drawings in the U.S. of flying
Yes,
pterodactyl-like
yes,
animals.
yes.
Apparently
They couldn't
relatively
survive for a
modern.
while. Yes.
Another thing this morning, the granite being mentioned as an igneous rock.
Yes.
One, it seems to me like the depth of granite deposits are way too deep, maybe miles deep, to be anything related to what we would know of as volcanic activity. Two, and primarily David Gentry's polonium.
No, when I said igneous rock, I didn't mean necessarily volcanic. I meant
Yeah,
liquid
but
when it
heat.
formed. That heated up. and
Yeah,
formed,
but David Gentry's discovery of the radio halos, which would not exist even at kitchen oven temperatures.
Robert Gentry was an Adventist, is an Adventist
Robert
scientist. What I say? Did I say Robert? Robert Gentry basically is a scientist who showed via polonium halos in zircon crystals in granite evidence that it looked like granite was instantaneously made. His research has not been, in my opinion, refuted by science. So it's still good science that's not been refuted. So yeah, I just classified granite as the standard classifications of it's not a sedimentary rock. But yeah, it looks like that. Yes.
Like the mammoths in Alaska with green grass still in their mouths.
Yes.
Wasn't there a shift in the Earth axis too at one point that
Yes, but
could
not
have caused
necessarily
the sudden
contributing.
freeze?
Not necessarily contributing to the ice age. But yes, actually, I have a theory. Again, it's a beautiful theory because you can't disprove it. I think, and it's partly for theological reasons, that I think that God started the flood by an asteroid shower or a meteorite shower. And partly because God's tool of judgment is rocks from heaven. Sodom and Gomorrah is an example. But there's lots of evidence of meteorite strikes, and it may well be that a series of meteor strikes knocked the Earth off its axis over like this. I don't know of too many creationists who would disagree with this, and certainly evolutionists, that the Earth probably was vertical with the sun at one time. Now it's like this. If you take a look at Genesis and the description of God talking about after the flood, he says from now on it's going to be warm and cold, and seasons as in changing temperatures. And that's really from this. So that might have happened. Now, I don't know how it would contribute to an ice age. It is interesting that the ice age is very localized to North America, to Greenland, a little bit of Scandinavia, but not much of Russia until you get all the way over to Siberia. So Europe, Northern Europe, some of Northern Europe, and most of Russia skipped the ice age. And they're not entirely sure why, but I would suggest to you that those other areas that did get the ice age were closer to volcanic action and got a little bit more of that, got a little bit more of those effects that I talked about. Incidentally, there is no flood model yet been presented that doesn't leave a couple of unanswered questions. Because honestly, what God did during the flood was complete obliteration. We're not talking about just a little water up and then a little water down. We're talking about no recognizable anything after the flood. Everything, God took it back to day one of creation, undid creation, and started over again. So, and that means continent forming, that means India, when India slammed into Asia, it wasn't what these tectonic people are saying, these little oomph, oomph, oomph. I think it was more like that, and that's how you get the Himalayas, 6 miles up. So all of the, yeah, anyway, it's off the scale what God did at the flood. That the ark survived is an absolute miracle.
Yeah, I've just wondered, how viruses reproduce. I've just wondered in my mind if they are a kind of Satan's attempt at creating life, because they replicate. They don't reproduce and grow and develop like God's creation, seems to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Abiogenesis or even mitosis without the two sexes Incidentally, evolution cannot explain two sexes. That is a very hard thing to explain. It is far more efficient for something to be able to replace itself without having to find somebody else. So evolution should favor those things that do not need this male-female thing. Incidentally, another thing that we shouldn't have if we're into evolution is needing to sleep or rest. Because obviously animals that don't need to rest have a higher survivability. So why is it that we seem to have been made for companionship and for rest? Because both of those would suggest that they are hindrances in evolution anyway. But yeah, that's clearly designed into us. So anyway, I didn't really help you with virus. But I don't know. Satan cannot, as Ellen White has said clearly, cannot create life. But what can he do? He can mess with it. So yes, what did he do? Don't know. And viruses may be one of those things, although there's times when you can see viruses as being sort of helpful in some cases, in some ways of either strengthening immune systems or eliminating some threats of other things. So it's hard to see. Yes?
I've seen photos that belong to Walter Weiss.
Yes.
Of old pottery that was found.
Yes.
And the pictures on them are people and dinosaurs living together.
Yes.
And they were just really beautiful
Yes.
pottery, and I thought that was neat.
Those are stones found in graves in South America, and they are, what's the word? Sensational, and what is it when it causes an uproar? What's it? Scandal? Controversial. Thank you. That's it. Controversial. And not 100% certain because there are some that they know who the modern artist is. There are some that they don't know if it was a modern. So here's the thing. They're not sure if there are modern people trying to copy original old pieces for the sake of selling them to new, uncareful buyers. But are some of the original ones genuine? And that's probably the part that everybody will admit is intriguing. But that there are some fake ones, there's no question about it, because you can go to the house where they're made. Yeah, I have a good friend that really is a believer in those, absolute believer. And I'm just a little bit more careful. The thing is, we do have ancient Indian pictographs that no question seem to be portraying dinosaur-like animals. Whether they were legendary to them in their day or whether they were current in their day might be a matter to argue. How old the pictographs are is also a little bit sketchy. But I have no problem with imagining for a while that some of these animals did live later than the flood. I have no problem with that at all. I think I give you that hint. We have to be careful on some of these things, and that's all. When I was hired to do this job by Max Torkelson, he came with me. We had a very serious talk. Came into his office and he said, "Now, Stan, there's a lot of people that go around talking on these subjects. I kind of would like it if you would actually make a list of those that you feel are reputable." And I said, "I don't want to do that. That's not on me. No, who's going to be a judge of these people?" But I got what he was saying, He's saying there's a lot of things out there that are not always the best information. And he really wanted me to stick to things that were very solid and very provable and not particularly controversial. And that's what I do, because I don't think I need the other thing. I don't need to, for instance, I don't need to see a dinosaur on an ancient pot to believe in dinosaurs or that they lived at the time of man. So when those pots become the issue, then usually it's better to shift to something else. Does that make sense at all? Yeah, I don't know. You've got to avoid some of the sensational stuff. Incidentally, I got to be open to some things, because I'll tell you what, about a month ago, I had a man approach me in church, very nice guy, would be a part of your congregation, no questions about it, a nice solid Adventist, who was absolutely certain that he'd had an encounter with a group of Bigfoot, and had lots of details, and he was with a group of other people, and gave me lots of details to where I couldn't argue with his experience. He had a very genuine experience, and I remain skeptical, but I don't know how else I can explain it. Was that a bunch of college kids that caught these guys off guard and, dressed up? But boy, he was convincing, and I said, please send me your story. He's never written it out. Send me your story. You see, and it's healthy to be cynical, but here's something you can't do. You cannot attack a person's experience, because if it's real to them, you need to honor that if it was real to them. And if it gets you to a place where, you know what, I can't explain it. First of all, I'm skeptical that anything that big could live that long and not be detected. A little bit better than that. But anyway, that's just me. Loch Ness Monster, you want me to tell you about that? Loch Ness Monster, people have often brought that up when we talk about dinosaurs. Was that a swimming dinosaur, a plesiosaur? And it said, have you seen the more recent acknowledgement by the guy that faked the most famous picture of all, photograph with that head in the water? He said, yeah, I faked it. It looked fake, but anyway, he said it was fake. And that kind of shot down a lot of people. Is there a plesiosaur in Loch Ness in Scotland? No. Want me to tell you why? Because everybody and their cousin has brought in the most sophisticated sonar developed by man and checked every square inch of that lake. And with the great hope and the great motivation of being on television and talking about what they just found. I mean, tremendous motivation to find it. Never did, never have. Was there originally a plesiosaur in there that started the tails? I have a tendency to believe that more. But anyway. Yes, champion, whatever it is. Yeah, in that category.
Well, I know that in early 60s, in the Gulf of Alaska, they were taking and mapping the bottom of the ocean.
Okay.
And they came across this creature swimming at 20 knots. And they graphed it, and it was about the length of 3 football fields.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, the Japanese fishing
up
there
I
have
know,
also
I know about this one.
netted
Yes.
some of these creatures, and they look like a swimming dinosaur.
Okay, now I can speak from experience. I know what you're talking about now. Now, that is a very famous photograph, and they've got something pulled up in a hoist, and it sure looks like a plesiosaur. It's got the fins, it's got the little head kind of thing. It looks like a swimming dinosaur. However, that's been looked at carefully. I don't know if you understand Japanese thinking. Japanese thinking would not be, hey, this is a dinosaur, let's throw it away. Please. Okay, no one's getting this? This is a $1 million find. Shall we toss it into the ocean? No, anyway, the point is this. It was a basking shark that had lost part of its head. And a basking shark does lose some of its part of its head. I forget if it's the jaw that falls off, and it leaves a small-looking head with the fins and everything. That's been identified biologically is what that was. But again, I just take it from a human nature standpoint. We just caught a dinosaur. Yeah, interesting, huh? Let's throw it back. But yes, I will go with that, absolutely. And 3 football fields? Well, that would be way bigger than anything historically fossil. But very interesting. Yeah, are there things still to discover? Yes. Deep ocean probably would be the best place.
During the flood, you said that the water rose slowly.
Yes.
And that people would have had time to get
If you look
higher
at,
ground.
If you look at Patriarchs and Prophets, Ellen White specifically says people got to the highest mountain.
My question is, where are those fossils of the people?
Okay.
Have they been found?
And I haven't had a
and
chance.
Are they large like
Yeah.
we think they are?
Okay, 2 things. Number 1, what happened to the people? First of all, take a look at the description of what Ellen White did. And again, with those footprints that I showed you of lizards trying to escape rising water. People likewise had the same ability to figure out what's going on here. We need to find the highest places. Had a few weeks to adjust and to travel. I'm sure they did. Ellen White said they were at the top of the highest mountains. When the water got up to them, what happened? They drowned. And was there anything to put on top of them from other mountains? No, they were at the top. And furthermore, the Bible says that the waters raged for another 150 days. So I want you to think what the condition of those people, those bodies would be, 150 days in very active ocean waves. There wouldn't be much left. Then when the waters did descend, did come down, their remains are going to be where? On the top of the ground. And Ellen White said that God sent a great wind. Now that's described in the Bible. The wind is because the atmosphere is trying to recover. The wind is sending dust and dirt on top of those bodies to cover them, but not to fossilize them under hundreds of feet of material.
So just to...
Pardon me? Well, yeah, if they weren't already. Well, if there was in the water still, yes, exactly, yes. So there wouldn't be, the way you get a fossil is to bury them under hundreds of feet of stuff.
My follow-up is, has there ever been anything
and that was
found?
second part. And when we see these giant human skeletons and the internet and so forth, the one I saw about a year and a half ago, I want to say it was it in China or Chinese diggers? Anyway, that aside, I saw this picture. They were digging around this huge skull and skeleton. And let me just tell you that when I saw it, I broke out laughing. The reason is I do a lot of PowerPoint presentations. I work with PowerPoint. I use, now suddenly I can't think of it. Photoshop. Thank you. You know, that was a good lunch. Anyway, so Photoshop, I Photoshop a lot of things. And to me, it was a very poor quality of Photoshopping, of dropping in this oversized skeleton around some diggers. So to me, if you discovered a giant human skeleton, what would you do with it? I would take it to a very public venue. I would have television, sell tickets, yes! But anyway, I'm American. But yes, but I would have it in front of cameras, television. I would have other scientists present. Frankly, I'd pick the most skeptical scientists I could find, and I'd say, please study these, take them to your lab, do whatever you need to do, and you give me what you think they are. And make it so public that they're not going to disappear somewhere. And frankly, there's so many anecdotal stories of bones being found or remains being found or oop art things or out of place art objects, whatever, that suddenly have been hidden and no longer available. Now, I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I'm saying even if it's true, we can't use it because it's anecdotal. You can't prove that these things are found. If I tell you a story, they found 50 living giants in Brazil in the rainforest. Okay, you got any pictures, got any evidence? No, but some real strong tradition, yeah, you know, they're there. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, evidence to me has got to be on the table in front of everybody, including skeptics. No, the ones I have seen have been poorly done. I would not say that there's no evidence. And I will not say that there's none of these anecdotal stories of things suddenly getting hidden into Smithsonian closets or whatever aren't true. There may be something to that. So there is a science community that there's a tendency to not want to deal with conflicting data. And when they get conflicting evidence against a theory, there is some, I remember reading in National Geographic, yes, I'm guilty, I read in there, and they found some human remains in China that were clearly Caucasians. And I remember, and they were deep enough to where it caused some scientists to bother. And one of them simply said, I wish you'd just take those bones and get them out of here and go put them somewhere else. Because it messed up their model. They were honest. You know, so some of that is true. Any other questions? Last ones. You got a microphone? Yes. Boy, make it a good one.
Okay, so like in the movies.
In the
they-
movies.
Yeah, they like show the dinosaurs and they're like really powerful and they're just able to eat everyone.
Of course.
Is that really like how it would be?
What do you think? I don't know. When I see a T-Rex, I look at him and I'd say, yeah, I'd probably go the different direction if I saw it. But you know what? I was just at that abandoned zoo, that abandoned petting zoo, world safari thing. Okay, you don't know what I'm talking about? Abandoned.
Wildlife safari.
Yes, wildlife safari, not the one in Winston. There's a. That's what it's called now. Yes, I think it used to be petting zoo, but now it's a more famous sort of sounding. But anyway, I was there, and there was a young lion in a cage there. And the beautiful thing about this place is there is no barriers. There's no this then this. It's this, and so the lion is right there. Anyway, this young lion was on its perch, its back over there, and he's looking at anybody walking up to it. So I walk up to it, and he's like this. I tell you what, I was feeling spiritual thoughts at the time because he was like ready to jump. And eventually he did, and came right over, and then he started rubbing against the side of the screen like this. But the point is, that kind of close proximity to something with teeth, yeah, I don't know. I guess God wants us to pet him. So would you want to pet a T-Rex? You would? Okay, there you go. Yes.
I've always been a little bit skeptic of carbon dating.
Carbon dating, oh my
A
goodness.
friend of mine was a dentist in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah, yes.
And he took and buried some teeth that took out of a patient that were bad, and he buried them in his backyard for 1 year.
Okay.
Then he took them up to the University of Alaska
Uh-huh,
and
Fairbanks.
to have them carbon dated, see what they thought.
Okay.
Oh, they were just something else, you know. Oh, these are thousands and thousands of years old. And he laughed at him and told him how old they were and that he planned them. They booted him out of there.
Yeah, now
But,
see,
you
that
know,
was
how they come up with it's got to be those people that are reading it to what they're wanting to be or something, because they didn't have a slightest idea how old those teeth were.
yes, and it was probably mean. Can I tell you that? A little mean to trick them like that. Now, my problem is I want to do the same thing. I got to deal with that spiritually. Because frankly, you'll embarrass them. And I don't particularly want to embarrass them, but I do want to expose the poor science that's involved. Carbon-14 dating is used to date things that used to be alive. Trees, animals, things that were alive. Not rock, animals and such. So it had to be something that took in carbon during their life. Carbon-14 is made in the air. That's all. That's the only place it comes. By gamma rays or whatever rays hit it from up there and knock the nitrogen into carbon. Carbon comes down into plants. Also, if animals eat plants, they get the carbon in them that way. Then carbon-14 starts to break down and become nitrogen again, leaving only regular carbon, which is carbon-12. They measure the difference between the two, and they'll tell how long it's been since it got any carbon-14 into it. In other words, how long ago it died. So that's the concept of it now. That's only used for thousands of years because it has a 5,700-year half-life. So half of it's gone in 5,700 years. It's only used for thousands of years, not millions of years. What's used for millions of years? Lava. Far and away the most common thing of dating rocks is lava. And this is used for millions of years. Now, carbon-14 dating only works when the atmosphere has not been messed with. In other words, the amount of carbon-14 being made has been left to just go naturally. If you have, okay, remember Krakatoa? Hearing about the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in Indonesia in like 1883 or something? That was such a powerful event and ionized the atmosphere around it. And carbon-14 daters know they can't date anything in that general area because the atmosphere threw things off. Same thing with Bikini Atoll, the nuclear bomb tests after World War II in the South Pacific. Messed up the carbon-14 dating in the area. So they don't carbon-14 date there. The point is you will not mess in atmosphere any more than you did during the flood. So after the flood, it took a while for the atmosphere to stabilize and to saturate the carbon-14 there to the amount that it needs to be to produce the same amount we have today. I frankly think that carbon-14 dating for 2,000 or 3,000 years might be probably pretty good. But when you get closer to the flood, I think the clock is thrown off and it's unreliable. Now they found carbon-14 in diamonds, and that's not possible by current models, because a diamond is supposed to be about 1 billion years old, one of the oldest rocks. So the point is carbon-14 dating looks exceptional on paper. When you put it into practice is when they have messes. And typically, if a carbon-14 that lab gives a sample 3 different years, they will be very interested in what year the person that brought the sample in wants and is hoping for. And that person will select that date that's favorable to their model. And carbon-14 dating labs are very aware of that. And I've got an article that I've quoted from that talks about that problem. Say, we do this, but they select the dates they want. And we're wondering why there any validity to those dates. So anyway, carbon-14 dating is not as reliable as you've heard. Anything else? Want to go home? So anyway, why don't we all stand while I'm closing word of prayer. If you want to come up and ask me questions or look at the cool stuff I've got up here, you may do so. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for the evidence of all these things. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about the flood this morning and the importance of the first angel's message going to the world to call the world back to its fundamental relationship with its creator God. Lord, we thank you for the evidence of your creation all around us. The reliability, the biblical record of the flood is clear. The amazing animals that once were dinosaurs that man apparently messed around with, the devil, I guess, through man. We thank you for all these things, Lord, evidence of the powerful creator you are. But above all these things, when we looked at dinosaurs and flood, when we look at the human being called man, the incredible complexity in which we are made, we just think of what a marvelous creator you are. And to care about us in this vast universe is just an amazing thing. That even sparrows fall and are noticed by you. Thank you, Lord, for your great love for us. May we continue to be blessed on this memorial of creation. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Thank you, folks. God bless.